Several minutes of commercial-free football starts now. Here are the Purple Mortgage Guys.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Purple Mortgage Guys. Myself, Brent. We got Goose, Tanner coming to you on a Sunday night here just to talk a little Vikings football. Free agency period starting this week, and then the huge news of the Adam Thielen release. Maybe surprising news of Cam Dantzler being released, and then the Vikings are still, I believe, $7.4 million over the cap as of tonight. So, looking for some thoughts from you guys and anyone that might be watching tonight as we're recording. Go ahead and throw some comments on the page here anytime. We'd love to address those in real time and get some, some general consensus on what we think is going to happen next, guys. So heading into free agency week, the legal tampering period, as they call it, starts tomorrow. Vikings do have to be under the cap by Wednesday, I believe, and they've got $7.4 million left on that. So, guys, that could come in a lot of different ways. That could be a restructure, that could be a trade, that could be a release. Tanner, start with you. What do you got for us tonight?
Yeah, I've been scrolling through Twitter all day, just waiting for moves, and I realized that a lot of this isn't good timing with Bud Grant passing away yesterday. And the team probably wants to be a little cautious about trying to respect the fact that happened. So, but at the same time, some of these moves that still need to be completed should have been done 2 weeks ago. And I realize there are a lot of fans out there that think that we probably need to be patient with Kwesi, but I just kind of pissed off that this takes so long. There's just some very obvious moves that should have happened already. And I just can't imagine, as a general manager of a team, why wouldn't you want the obvious moves to just take place? And it just takes a load off your shoulder. You have that much more wiggle room to look at the tougher decisions on your team, like the Dalvin Cooks and the Zadarius Smiths on the roster. And you just have a little bit more leniency with them. And I'm just upset that we haven't cut players like CJ Ham. We restructured Ross Blacklock. He didn't even play last year. What is the point of that? Just save that money and draft somebody else. Bring somebody in that you can groom and teach. Johnny Munt, why is he coming back? He should have been cut already. Brian O'Neill, that's a simple restructure. There's just a lot of moves that should have already taken place that haven't yet, and I just don't understand what we're waiting on.
Let me play devil's advocate with you. What if they are trying to restructure a few different things right now behind the scenes, and they've got the time? So.
Who specifically? Kirk Cousins?
Could be Cousins. It could be Brian O'Neill. Could be a trade for Delvin. What if there's a lot of different lines in the water, so to speak? Is that possible? Or is that not how it works?
I mean, it is, but I still don't think that those simple restructures or a potential trade affect little simple cuts like Jordan Hicks. Unless they plan on bringing him back next year, then I'll keep my mouth quiet, but
couldn't you do that, though, right at the last minute? I mean, it's just you've got your backup plan. And
I would like to be able to have the wiggle room to know that I have that cap space up front and I have a little bit more leniency going into Wednesday, knowing I got, more cap space to work with to do simple restructures. Maybe you don't have to restructure Brian O'Neill if you don't want to. You can leave his contract as is. There's just simple players on the roster I feel like should have already been terminated. And I'm a little concerned that Kwesi has this weird narrative in his head that he needs to have players on the roster that are just his guys. And I don't know if it's a character thing or what. We can get into Cam Dantzler here in a second, but I want to get Goose's thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to know what the real plan is because every front office is always going to say we're just retooling, we're not rebuilding. And maybe they aren't. But I look at some of the moves that we'll need to make here coming up and how many holes that could potentially cause, and then the ways that we can fill those holes. Compensatory picks came out. We got one, and it's a late rounder. We don't have much for we don't have much for draft capital at all. To expect really anyone other than our top 2 picks as they stand now to come in and contribute, I think is a reach. And even if we make a bunch of cap moves, I think we're probably lucky to get into the $10 million, $20 million range, which is 1 or 2 big time players or just a bunch of kind of mid-level players. And I think everyone was feeling like we weren't a player or 2 away last year, and a lot of our key guys are only getting older. So you look at Harrison, makes me pretty nervous at 34 years old. Maybe not willing to restructure as much, a lot left on his contract. And just having the thought of multiple players with a big dead cap number on the roster is always kind of makes you a little sick too. When you got maybe potentially 20 million plus in dead cap that's not going to a player who's contributing to your team. So I think if we get to a point, we're going to have to look at, okay, is 2023 season a scrap, and let's reboot for 2024. I think.
So how do you get under the cap, Goose? What are you doing on a Sunday night to get under the cap? What are the couple of moves that make it easy?
Yeah, the one that I've been talking about for probably the longest is a Brian O'Neill extension, and then you look at the big thing is you got to look at who do you plan on keeping on the roster, that you could maybe convert some of their salary to bonus and do some things like that. And then, as Tanner kind of hit on, I think you have to look at someone like CJ Ham, and then have a plan for some of these other guys. And Brent, I think you had a good reminder to me that maybe they are hoping on maybe getting a trade call on someone that they were going to release, or trying to get some of that compensation, try to retool. I know Tanner mentioned like pick up someone in the draft for Blacklock, but you're so limited in the draft. And if you plan on drafting wide receiver and a quarterback, probably multiple corners, it's just going to depend. But I think you got to do some restructuring, and then you got to take a hard look at the roster and decide what you're going to do. I feel like you should have a pretty good pulse right now on who has trade value, who doesn't. And if you're not getting a call, you got to start making moves.
Let me make it simple for you guys. Zadarius Smith, Delvin Cook, Harrison Smith. You can add any other names to that. Any of those 3 are you getting rid of before Wednesday if you're the GM? If you're Quasi. Goose, what are you going to do there?
It's going to be a big. There's a lot of what ifs there. I think if I'm at all concerned about Zadarius not playing or being an impact to the locker room, you got to look at moving him.
Tanner, go ahead.
I think that's probably the biggest one is how upset Zadarius is going to be if we make him play under his current contract.
Tanner, who are you getting rid of? You want these moves to happen, but a million here, a million there is not going to do it. Who are you getting rid of here before Wednesday?
So just to go off those 3 real quick, Harrison Smith should have been restructured weeks ago. Like unless they're fielding trade calls for him, that's just another name. Like I don't understand why this hasn't been taken care of already. Zadarius Smith has made it clear he's not, like Goose said, wants to play under that contract. He wants a new deal. Based off his second half production of the season last year, I don't necessarily think that he deserves a new deal. And if he doesn't want to be here, bye. Like I don't love players that just don't necessarily like want to be on this team. Like if you don't want to be here, then make the simple cut. If you can't find a trade partner, this is one name that they could potentially be trying to shop around, trying to find a trade partner before Wednesday that might actually fit that narrative. But if they don't, I think that is one name that we could see cut before Wednesday. And then the last one, Dalvin Cook, I think everybody kind of knows how I feel about him already. Don't like that cap number for the production that we received last year. Seems like he's hurt all the time. I know he played all 16 games last year, but he did not play them at 100%. We know that for fact. So I'm just, I think I'm ready to move on from Dalvin. Unfortunately, I think that we can get, I just think we can get equal production, like we talked about on our show last week, in a free agent, like a veteran free agent and a draft pick.
So if you could get a 5th for Delvin, would you do it?
Yes.
What about a 6th?
Probably not.
You draw the line at 5th round. Okay.
Yeah.
Quick follow-up on that, Tanner. The hot rumor of the day, and it seemed like maybe one source that everyone was running with is Delvin getting traded and re-signing Madison. Do you have a number in your head where you are okay with Alexander Madison coming back? As far as like how much he's getting paid a year.
Matt has been a really good back in his opportunities that he's had to start for us, I think. But I don't think he's like that 3-down workhorse that you're going to be labeled as your full-time starter. He's going to be your short yardage back. He's really good in pass protection. I mean, he's an okay receiver, but I don't think he's going to be your go-to guy on a 3rd-down option. So I would probably pay him like $5 million, $6 million max. And if he wants more than that, then let him walk.
So the other thing that's been brought up on a few of the national reports this weekend was the Cousins extension talks. Sounds like they've stalled a little bit. Are we all in agreement there that they're not going to trade him because he's got a no trade clause? Goose, I know you and Tanner might differ on that. Do you let the final year play out or do you extend? Is that at all maybe part of what's – I feel like there's a ton of things going on behind the scenes and we don't have a clue what they are, so we just got to let it play out. Tanner's upset because he's not in the loop and wants to know what's going on. Goose, I have no idea what you think, but is Cousins' contract part of this?
I think it's got to be a big part of it because I had never entertained the Kirk Cousins trade until about today. But I was on record a few episodes ago. I really don't want to extend him. He's going to be,
36, I think.
He's going to be 36 at the start of the season. So he's going to be.
Nothing's really happened that we didn't see coming other than Cam Dantzler. And if Cam Dantzler changes our opinions drastically, that's probably more of an us problem. But Tanner says if Kirk gets traded, he's quitting the show. So we got that going. So he doesn't think it's happening, I think is what he's trying to say. I hope.
Yeah, Cam was a huge surprise. Adam, there was something to me with Adam where I knew it was very likely. But if there's anybody who's ever played in the NFL that's going to take a hometown discount and try to finish out his career, it's Adam Thielen. So I also look at any time that a team would rather have $13 million going to nobody in the upcoming season than to have Adam on the field and at a $19 million number. Or I like to believe that there was some room that Adam was willing to move. It just wasn't enough. So that was just kind of a big eye opener to me. And the big reason that Dantzler kind of moves the needle for me is corner was already a need. Now we're looking at 2, 3, 4 corners that we have to go and sign, and we're limited on resources. And so if we're going to piece together the D line and we're going to piece together the corners, and we are maybe relying on Bynum and Seen to play deep DB, and maybe a rookie or Jalen Naylor and KJ Osborne being our receiving core with JJ. And we're not sure what's going on at center. There's a lot of question marks. And so then I get to the thought of, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to rebuild, is there a team out there that would give us some compensation? It's more about the money, but some compensation that is maybe willing to sign Kirk to a 2, 3, 4 year deal And we know that Kirk's whole career, he's wanted some stability. So if the Vikings have gotten to a standstill on not extending him, I could see him waiving his no trade clause to go to a team who's willing to give him a 2-3 year deal to finish out his career. And it might be time, because we're always going to have that risk. The big conversation on this is you don't want to screw things up with JJ by missing on quarterback. Until you take the quarterback and try it, like, that's going to be a chance. And so if you feel really good about one in this year's class, you do what you got to do to get him and hope it works, I guess.
Okay, so let me ask, Tanner, I'll start with you. Your dream scenario here for the next 2 days, what does it look like? Like, there's too much vagueness. I don't like what we're doing. This isn't working. We're not under the cap. But nobody really has like a clear plan. They just don't like the way it's going. So what does it got to look like?
Kirk Cousins extension is like my backup plan. Like, if you
I don't want to hear your backup plan, though. I want to hear your dream scenario.
I want to go through my positions here real quick, and I'm using Kirk to start because he's the quarterback.
Okay.
So if we get into cap, even worse than we already are, like real cap hell, a Kirk extension is like my last scenario. I don't
get out of jail free card.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I don't want to extend him. I want him to play out his contract because, like Goose said, he's going to be 36, and every single QB in this league, unless you're Tom Brady, seems to hit a wall once they approach their mid-30s or late 30s. So it's time. It's time to start looking at that futuristic option. And I hope that they do that in the draft this year. I just don't know where they're going to select the QB. CJ Ham should be cut. I would like to see Dalvin Cook traded. I would like to see Johnny Munt cut. Offensive line, I think we're sitting okay. I think they have some options at center. You can probably get a pretty cheap free agent, as well as there's some solid guys in the draft here too. Defensive line, I kind of hashed on Twitter today as well. Seems like we're going to be in a really tough spot here as well soon. I still am just baffled that they restructured Ross Blacklock. He didn't even see the field last year at all. Like, he's on the team. You traded for him. He didn't play. And you could have just saved even more money by just cutting him outright. Like, I just don't really understand it. So we could be looking at two spots that we might have to address on the defensive line. I'd like to see Zadarius cut. I think he's a really good player, but if he doesn't want to be here, best of luck to you.
Cut or traded? Ideally
scenario.
Ideally traded, because I think they actually save more cap space if they trade him, but I just don't know if you're going to find a trade partner 2 days before free agency starts. Linebacker, I'd like to see Jordan Hicks cut. I'm not super adamant about that one because I do think you need one veteran guy in the locker room. Jordan's been playing forever, but I think there's some pretty solid free agent options out there as well that you could probably get for cheaper. Goose has kind of touched on corner already. There is nobody else left to cut unless Kwesi wants to cut his own guys. So that's a nightmare scenario in its own. And I would like to see Harrison Smith restructured and see him finish his career here in Minnesota. That's probably my ideal scenario.
I think the only thing you didn't hit on then was Brian O'Neill. Would there be a restructure there too?
Yes.
Okay.
That also seems pretty obvious to me. That's just another one like I don't know what we're waiting on.
Okay, Goose, would you trade Delvin? And the second part would be, would you cut or trade Zadarius? Because that really seems like what we're trying to decide on here.
Yeah, my prediction was Delvin's the starter at the beginning of the year. In my dream scenario, I think you got to let him walk. And then unless you feel confident that you can turn Zadarius's psyche around, I think you got to move him as well. I think they're both gone.
Anything with Neil or
just I would give him a new contract for O'Neill. And I also forget.
What about Danielle Hunter? Sorry.
Oh, Daniel.
See, that's one guy we haven't really talked about at all yet because we haven't seen his name like rumored at all. But like, if there's one player on our team, it definitely is, and I do think that he's going to probably thrive in a Flores scheme. But if there is one player on this roster right now, not named Justin Jefferson, that you can get like prime compensation for, it's Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, very true. You guys think
Gosh,
it's
you
gonna-
look at Jalen Ramsey trade today, and it's like how much can you get for a guy who wants to get paid a lot? He's 29. Daniil was the young player for so long, and all of a sudden he's 29 years old, and it's like, what happened?
I know it. He was raw. Remember, that was like the thing on him. He's so young and raw. So I'm curious if anyone, any of our viewers here have any dream scenarios they'd like to see between now and Wednesday. Throw it in the comments, whether it's live now or later on as you're watching it. But I feel like we're kind of all on the same page with Delvin and Za'Darius. Kirk's probably like, there's so much that could happen. And I feel like we're going to be surprised again tomorrow with something. It just feels like something unforeseen is probably going to pop up. So,
yeah, the one hope I think with Za'Darius that Tanner made me think of a second ago is maybe a team misses out on a guy, and their backup plan is now to seek out a trade for a guy like Z or Daniil. And I guess we'll see from there. But Brent, are you on the 1 year train with Kirk? Let him play out his contract?
I'm fine with that. I was more of an extension, but I don't know.
38-year-old Kirk Cousins scares me.
Here's what I'm not in the same boat as Tanner's frustrated with Kwesi. I'm just like, you know what? Give him a chance. Let's give it a year. Let's give a draft class here again and see how it plays out.
Kwesi gets a 3-year trial period from me.
It feels like
I am a little not excited about the fact that even dating back to training camp last year, it seems like he came in and just threw all of Rick's guys out.
Yeah.
And I still feel like the Cam Dantzler cut was more of a locker room thing because I know that his name was already brought up in trade compensation even after his rookie year. So I do think that was not performance related, but I still just don't like how Kwesi came in and he's just like, this is going to be my guys or nobody. And none of Kwesi's guys really performed last year. So you got 2 more years. I'm on.
I would say the reason we're not talking about tight ends this year, though, is because of Mr. Kwesi as well. So
yeah,
I'm going to let it play out. I'm going to be patient.
How much are you going to pay TJ Hawkinson?
I don't know.
One quick thought on this topic, and I think it might be part of it, is I think a lot of fans right now are maybe feeling a little worried because Ryan Poles and Kwesi are kind of gonna. It's like Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson. Like they were going through interviews with both of them with the Vikings. Both of them similar teams. They get hired around the same time. And the first 6 months to a year, it was like Kwesi was the guy. Like, we did it. I'm glad we didn't get Poles. Poles is blowing it up. He's getting rid of Staples and I think the fan base, he was losing the fan base for a while. And now you get to this and it's like, oh, the Bears could be scary. Fields still has to figure it out. Who knows? But their receiving core is pretty darn good, pretty darn young. They have the most cap space in the NFL. They have great draft capital, and their roster's decent. So I think that's causing a lot of fans to panic. Is did we get the right guy? We didn't have a choice because he signed with the Bears, but I think that's going to be kind of a comparison that plays out over time. And obviously, the Bears are the worst team in the league, so it's hard to see a bunch of fans being like, look at the situation the Bears are in. And it's like, well, we never want to lose, but they are in a good position right now. And I think that causes some stress on Vikings fans looking at Kwesi.
Yeah, it can change quickly because I don't think he was looked at favorably a few months ago even. So
one other thing real quick. This was the last day today to re-sign any guys that you might potentially want before they hit that tampering period tomorrow. And I'm just upset that we haven't re-signed Duke Shelley yet. What is happening? Duke Shelley was a stud last year.
Maybe tomorrow morning.
Bring him back.
Tomorrow morning, Tanner. Duke Shelley's going to be on your Twitter feed
tomorrow. There better be movement tomorrow, or I'm going to be very crabby.
this legal tampering period is probably a joke because they're probably all communicating anyway, so it probably doesn't even matter.
Oh,
They're in
But-
a yacht down in Miami.
You guys, can you get on board with this? Judy Geisa says, trade Cook, let Kirk play his final year, draft a QB. I know she doesn't want Anthony Richardson, but she wants a QB.
Will Levis is Judy's quarterback.
Is that who it is? Okay. She can confirm or deny, I guess. But that seems to be a very viable path that they take, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I think that, but that would to me be full rebuild. I think they need to do it if they like a guy, but you probably don't get him at 23. So you're probably giving away even more draft capital, and you just cannot fill all your needs if you have to move up.
This term rebuild, it's like, the term rebuild. So if you trade Cook, it's not a rebuild necessarily. If you let Kirk play out his final year, it's not. The rebuild term really becomes something that's obvious when they move up in the draft and waste other future capital, right?
I feel like rebuilds are when you get rid of like key pieces to your team. So if they were to like trade Daniil and trade Dalvin, like those are staples in your team. Like that to me is a rebuild.
Gotcha.
In my opinion, like everybody's probably got their own.
Everyone
competitive rebuild.
GMs nowadays are like, we're just retooling. We're not rebuilding. The one thing that I think the Vikings are in a good place to do this is you have JJ. Like we can take a year or two to retool. I don't think we can take much more than that. But you have JJ and you have a fairly young offensive line, and most teams struggling and are trying to find that quarterback have a crap O-line and they don't have anyone to throw to. And so they get their guy in and he's getting sacked every other play and he has no one to throw it to. And they're like, we got to move on from this quarterback. So the one thing I think we've got going for us is we've really invested in our O-line the past 3-4 years. And we have Justin Jefferson. You just don't want to screw it up.
Sure. Well, Tanner, any closing thoughts? What's anything for this week? Because we'll probably jump on again. I don't know, maybe Wednesday, maybe sooner if something big happens.
Maybe tomorrow for a Duke Shelley re-signing.
Oh, if we don't re-sign Duke Shelley, I'm going to lose it.
Solo on there.
I swear to God, if Duke Shelley is not re-signed and in purple next year, and he wants to come back. Like he's like had tweets. If you go out and check his stuff, he's like, re-sign me. I want to be back in purple. And he played well last year. Like he deserves a second chance. I realize he's not super ideal. He's a little dude, 5'9", 180 pounds, but that's my guy.
That's your guy, huh? All right. Well, we'll see what happens. Busy week coming up, guys. We'll jump back on. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll be back again soon.